Let's start with a word of prayer. God, we thank you for this wonderful day, for friends gathered, for the opportunity that we have to sit together, read together, study together from your word. We ask your presence with us this morning, not only here in this room, but for others who may be on their way. Guide and direct our conversation. Help us to hear the message that you have for us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, what are we talking about today? We're talking about Amos, right? We didn't write that up here yet. Amos. Okay. Tell me about Amos. Do you know anything about him at all? Yeah. Okay. Primarily. Okay. So, so he went that way. What else do we know about him? He wasn't. Okay. Non-traditional. Somewhere along the way, he says, I was just doing my thing. And I got told to come here and tell you guys this stuff. And of course, he was well received, right? Yeah. So anyway, how different is this one from Jonah that we talked about last time? He was obedient. He was not trying to run away. We kind of do know how successful he was. The thing about last week is that Jonah was surprisingly successful. And we don't really know. Actually, we do know that he was not as successful because not too much after he was trying to talk to these folks, they did get wiped out. One of the things you've got in your folder is a couple of timelines that talk about the kings of Israel and Judah compared to when the prophets were, and it kind of has some dates on it and things like that. That's what it's in there for, because it's hard to read about the prophets without a background and figuring out where, how all this fits together. There's 12 of them. We're gonna find a lot of repeats in messages, but we'll try to as we go along the way. So he had 2 occupations when he was in Tekoa. Where's Tekoa, by the way? Did you find it on your map? It's not written. I drew mine in. Yeah, kind of. The border is the border between Israel and Judah is a little bit north of Jerusalem. So Tekoa is not very far away from the border, a little bit south of where that Jerusalem dot is on your map. So anyway, one of the things that we can say about him, which we can tell by reading what he wrote, is that he was pretty educated. And he was pretty strong personality too. I mean, he wasn't afraid to say some of this stuff out loud, right? So let's start reading. Let's read some of it. There are several pieces in Amos that are kind of interesting in a way. Let's start with the beginning, chapter 1. Read. You've got a standard opening. That's where we learn he's from Tekoa. When Uzziah was king of Judah and Jeroboam, the second actually, was king of Israel. It's interesting that second verse says, the Lord roars from Zion. Does your translation say that? One of the things that I found when I was looking over the summer is there's a children's series on the minor prophets, and the title for this one says Amos and God's roaring voice. And I think that's where they got it from, is that various places throughout Amos, it's talking about God roaring as a lion would from wherever he's talking from. So anyway, start with verse 3, and somebody just start reading. Anybody?
This is what the Lord said. As you sent to Damascus even before, I will not turn back my wrath, because she wretched Gilead, which pledges had an iron tooth, will send fire upon the house of Ahab, that will consume the whole city of Ben-Hadad. Will break down the gate of Damascus. I will destroy the king who is in the valley of Ahab, and the one who holds the scepter in Bethlehem. Will go into exile for Israel.
Somebody read the next section.
What the Lord I will send fire from the wall of God. It will destroy the kingdom of I will turn my hand
Okay, let's pause there a minute and just see, what are we talking about? I found the lightning bug, by the way. In your folder, you've got, go look at that map again. We've already read about 3 of these places. First was what? Damascus, or some of your translations might say Aram or Syria. They're all talking about the same place. The second set was about Gaza or Philistia. You see where that is. And then the one that Diana just read was about Tyre, which is up in the Lebanese area. Okay. These are traditionally enemy nations that they fought against from time to time. Gentile folks mostly. But then when we keep reading, starting with verse 11, who else are we talking about? Somebody read 11. 11 to 12. Anybody?
are
Okay. Somebody else read from 13 to the end of the chapter.
This is what the Lord says. For these things that I am going to do before, I will not turn back my wrath. Because he has broken the kingdom and the in order to extend his borders. I will set fire to the walls of Rabbah that will consume her fortresses amid war cries of the day of battle, amid violent scenes on a stormy day. Her kings will go into exile, and the suspicious day. That's the end.
Mm-hmm. The next one we're going to read is in chapter 2, continuing the first 3 verses. Anybody read that?
Thus saith the Lord, the three things that is Moab, before I will not provoke the country, because the line from the community. So I will send a fire from Moab, out of song, shouting, and it's down with the trumpet, and cut off the leaders of it, so that all
Okay. So these 3, did you catch it? They're closer. They're not just geographically by looking at the map, but you've got Edom and Ammon and Moab being talked about here. Not only are they physically a little closer, but they're more related. The area of Edom is related. Remember in Genesis? Remember those Genesis stories about Abraham and his family? Edom is that's Esau's folks. Remember Jacob and Esau in your Old Testament stories? That's Esau's folks down there. They're cousins, okay? The same thing with Ammon and Moab. Those are cousins now. You can think of them as. So imagine what is happening when this is beginning to sound like a litany. Litanies do repetitive kinds of things. And you can also imagine a politician making a speech. First, he's going to criticize those people we don't like. Then he's getting closer to home. It's like a dramatic progression going on in this message. And then what happened? They just, not that long ago, separated themselves. The United Kingdom is no longer united. You've got Israel and Judah. So they've just divided themselves. So imagine the cheers when the next section comes along. Beginning with verse 4. Somebody read that.
This is what the Lord said. The priests of Judah who lived before, as they have rejected the law, they have not kept the truth, that they have been led astray by false God. God, there is a good folly. I will send fire on Judah that will consume the fortress of Jerusalem.
Okay. So it's been building up. And you have to understand that at this point in time, Israel's in they think, a really good place. One of the things we mentioned, I think we mentioned last week, is that Jonah had a mention in the Old Testament outside of the prophet of the book of Jonah, where he had been speaking to the king there and saying, this is a good time. You're going to succeed in expanding your territory. And that's part of that's why I like this map and the accompanying text to it. It's talking about some of that, advance. So they're in a good place and they're relatively peaceful right now. And so imagine the politician who's making this speech. Here's what God says. He's going to wipe out all these people you don't like. And he's even going to wipe out those annoying cousins that you don't like. And especially that brother that you just had a fight with or had a disagreement with or separated from. But then what happens in verse 6 of chapter 2? Read a little bit of that. Anybody? Okay, that's a good start. So what are you hearing there? You can imagine that the cheering might have faded a little bit because now he's talking about them. So, okay. So it's like a litany. The Gentiles, the relatives, the brother. Now he's talking about us. Did we get to verse 9 yet? Not quite. Okay. Verse 9 begins to talk about the Amorites. Amorites were, there's 3 A words. They may not all be on this list, but they always confuse me, and they probably confuse you too. You've got Aram, when it says Aram, Aram, that's in the area of what we call Syria today, around the city of Damascus. You've got Ammon, which is in Jordan. Actually, Ammon and Moab and Edom, all those are in Jordan now. And then you've got Amorites, which is, at verse 9, it begins talking about Amorites. Who are those people? Well, they're not on this map because this is a divided kingdom map, but the Amorites are the people who were there before Joshua came in. Amorites are among those people who lived there before. So just try to keep that straight in your head. It's hard. It's hard to distinguish, but don't let those various people whose names start with A confuse you. So what's going on here? Remember the up and down, the cyclic curve that we talked about? It's all over the Bible. It's probably all over us too. They're in an up cycle right now, which increases the potential for forgetting about God and doing what they're not supposed to do, right? God's judgment has no favorites. Those who think they are safe, religious insiders that persist in oppression and injustice, is what he's talking about. Remember what we said before and have probably said many times about God's chosen people. Back to the Abraham story. You can't study the Bible without knowing what Genesis is about, because you just got to know that story. the chosen people. Chosen for what? It's like God chose the Israelites to be a demonstration community to the world. This is how it's supposed to go. And imagine God's disappointment when those chosen people mess it up in all these various ways that Amos is going to talk about. They're supposed to be a role model, if you want to put it that way. A demonstration group, a demonstration community. Here's how this is supposed to work. And they're messing it up. So he sends prophets to try to straighten them out. And that's what you're reading about here. God's chosen people, their favored nation status. But remember, they're blessed to be a blessing. And that's the part they're not doing. Correction is needed. As you read through Amos, what kind of verses caught your attention? We read the beginning. What else? There's a lot in Amos. Is there anything familiar that you've ever heard before? What? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's a familiar story. Mm-hmm. What else? What? It mentions Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. That's an example of how not to behave, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we remember plagues of Egypt. That's part of that Exodus story, isn't it? Uh-huh. And what is it? Do we know what it is? Mm-hmm. 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 So there's a lot of that. Anybody an Agatha Christie fan? Sort of. There's a story that she tells that that I'm fond of and watch or listen to on occasion that uses the phrase "let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Have you ever heard that verse? Did you read that this week? Did you see it? Later? Yeah, later. It's in there. Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's a big book. How many chapters? 9? Yeah, we haven't read it all yet, but that's what I'm asking you about. What did you find as you read that's familiar? Like that verse. Agatha Christie is quoting from Amos because it's part of the story that she's trying to tell with this particular story. What else did you find that looked familiar in here? This is not like a pop quiz. I'm asking you, did you read this or not? But I'm just curious, what stands out to you? Uh-huh. It's going to get pretty boring, isn't it? But it definitely repetitive. Yeah. That's one reason we're doing this, isn't it? Trying to remind ourselves of those lessons. Um, yeah, tell me what a plumb line is. Do you know? Straight. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Right. A weight on a string. A, a weight on a string. I mean, gravity still works. Gravity still works. A weight on a string will tell you what straight up and down is supposed to look like. So in here, in chapter 7 and 8, he talks about the plumb line, among other things. What else did you find in here that was familiar? Anything? Near the plumb line, there's a basket of ripe fruit. Did you ever hear him talking about that before? It's a way of talking about how we're kind of overripe to be disciplined. Mm-hmm. Does that remind you of something? Between the testaments, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, you sometimes hear people talking about how, you know, there wasn't any prophecy going on during that intertestamental time. In our scripture, we don't have that history. We have that history from other places, but not from our Bible. So that's what that reminds me of. But yeah, he's talking about the same thing. What were you going to say, Kate? Locust. One of these other prophets, we're going to read a lot more about locusts, aren't we? But yeah, there are familiar things in here. Just notice that this is where some of that comes from, as you hear it in other contexts within our culture. So let's read some of this. We talked about justice. Let's go look at chapter 5. Let's see, I turned too many. It's easy to turn too many pages. That's already too many pages. Chapter 5. Let's look at verse 21. 5:21. 21 to 24. Mm-hmm. There's that one. Why would God say that to people through the what? I mean, didn't God tell them to do those things in the first place? I mean, that's part of what we don't usually like to read in Exodus and Leviticus, because it's law being expounded and explained and laid down. Right. It's
We're just doing this because that's what God is doing.
going through the motions. Do we have that problem? These are cautions for us to let that come from the heart and not just because we've memorized them, because we've said them 100 or 1,000 times. It needs to mean something. Dead formalism is how somebody calls that. Let's go find those visions. That starts in chapter 7, I think. Chapter 7. Let's scan through that and see if we can find them. In chapter 7 at the beginning, Amos says, God was preparing swarms of locusts. When they'd stripped the land clean, I cried out, Sovereign Lord, forgive me. How can Jacob survive? He is so small. Here's an instance of the prophet interceding for the people with God, and God relented. It's not going to happen. He showed him a judgment by fire, drying up everything, and again relented. And then in verse 7, somebody read starting at 7. This is what we just talked about.
The Lord was standing by a wall that had been built with a plumb line in his hand, and the Lord asked me, what do you see in this plumb line? I replied, and the Lord said, look, I am setting a plumb line among my people of Israel. I will spare them no longer. The kindness of Isaac will be destroyed, and the sanctuary of Israel will be ruined. With my sword I will rise against the house of Jeroboam.
Okay. That's where that one comes from. The law is the law is set up for our guidance. It's like setting a plumb line, and you do it or you don't do it, or you're wishy-washy about it. Wow, what a thought. Right. Good observation. Yes. Right after that, there's another interesting discussion for a different reason. Who's Amaziah? He's one of the priests. Amaziah, some of the names get repeated every now and then. So I think Amaziah was one of the kings on the list. But this Amaziah is a priest. Uh-huh. Right. Samaria is like the capital city politically, but Bethel is where the worship was centered in the northern kingdom. In the southern kingdom, Jerusalem is where it all kind of happened, both ways. But in the, go ahead. Right. Yeah. This is what Amos is saying, and we get some of that there. Yes.
Kevin Hadley, God said, I will pick up my sword and strike you. God said, I'm going to pick up my sword. You're in trouble.
Deep trouble. Right. Okay. Is there something else, Grace, you were going to say? Okay. So Amaziah is talking to Amos now. Go away, is essentially what he's saying. Go back where you came from. Don't prophesy anymore here. And Amos says, this is where we find out what he used to do. I didn't ask for this. Yes. Come all the way up here, which is not really all that far, but when you're walking, it is. Yeah. I was not a prophet or a prophet's son, but I was a shepherd. And actually, the word they used at the beginning, more like a sheep breeder, is what some of your commentaries are going to say. I took care of sycamore fig trees. Apparently, there's some little details about growing that tree that you need to take care of every now and then. But the Lord took me from tending that flock and said, go prophesy to my people Israel. And he keeps going. You say, don't prophesy against Israel and stop preaching against the house of Isaac. You know, of course, because you know that Old Testament history, Jacob got renamed Israel. So sometimes when you hear Israel, it's Jacob's name. Isaac was part of that patriarchal set of folks as well. So those words get used interchangeably. Your translation might call it Ephraim instead of Israel. Some of the translations I've looked at use that terminology. Ephraim, who's Ephraim? You know? Ephraim is one of Joseph's two sons. Remember, I didn't give you this handout this time, but I have before. And I will fix more of those and take care of that later. But, you know, when you're reading in Genesis especially, it's helpful to have a chart of who's where and what's going on. The 12 tribes are essentially the 12 sons of Jacob, but the Levites got pulled out of that to be helpers in the worship area. And so to make it 12 again, Joseph, who had a special role to play in that Genesis history, his two sons each got a tribe named after them. So Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, each have a tribe of the 12 tribes. Of course, we're beyond that now because we're talking about the divided kingdom, where we're just talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Israel and Judah. But it's interesting that the territory that was assigned originally to Ephraim is right across the border. So Ephraim is just barely across the border into the northern kingdom. And Jerusalem is technically in the southern kingdom. So, okay. What were we talking about? How did we get off on that? We were talking about Amos and Amaziah. And what did he say? You said, don't prophesy against Israel. Stop. This is what the Lord says. And then he tells about all these awful things that's going to happen to them. Israel was certainly going to exile away from their native land. It didn't happen immediately, but it did a few years later. I mean, that's one of the things we talked about when we did our introduction about the succession of kings of Israel and Judah and their proximate relationship to the prophets. So if you look at this chart that I gave you that comes out of my copy of the today's English Bible, the Good News Bible. I like this one particularly because it's evenly spaced. You know, sometimes a chart will fudge on the scale. This one's evenly spaced, so that helps me to visualize. And what we're talking about right now is Amos during the time that Uzziah is king of Judah and Jeroboam II is king of Israel. It also happens to be roughly Jonah's time. So anyway, what else do we need to talk about? That was Amaziah. Look in chapter 8. There's some more interesting stuff in chapter 8. Somebody read 4 to 6 in chapter 8. 4 through 6. Yes.
Say, when will the new moon be over, that we may sow grain and Sabbath, that we may market, skipping the neighbor, boosting the price, and cheating with dishonest deceit, buying the poor with silver and the meat for a pair of sandals, selling, even those two beans with the meat.
That's got a lot in it. What's going on in that passage? Some specific ways to cheat people. Yes. Does that ever happen at our grocery store? Does your box of cereal get smaller and the price get bigger? Oh, well, that's settling. That's settling during the time that it jostles its way to your house, right? Yes. I mean, we have these same situations that we can observe, but the part about this particular passage, it brings up, you know, you're not supposed to do stuff on the holy days, but what Amos is saying is we can't wait for the festival to be over so we can go do these things again. We can go conduct our business again. That's one of the things he's accusing them of. We can't wait for those holy days to be over so we can go back to work, making a buck. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I go to church, I keep in choir and all this. This is just business on Monday.
Yeah. Well, Amos says it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. And in chapter 9, there's something that I wanted us to notice as well. Look at 9:7. And a couple of following verses. Aren't you Israelites the same to me as Cushites? It's, yeah. What about the idea of being the chosen people? How does that fit together? You're no better than those other people. Didn't I bring Israel up from Egypt? Didn't I save the Philistines from Captor and the Arameans from Tyre? See what I mean about these A words? Aramean, that means the Syrians. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not immune to this, especially if you abuse people like you've been doing. That's what Amos is trying to point out.
Reveals creation and his sovereign leadership. Other nations have been transplanted from their home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why we're trying to use a study Bible, because it brings out some of those explanations of what these verses are about. If you run across a label, a name, and it's like, where's that? Look it up, because those help give you a clue. Sometimes it feels like the Bible's written in code language. And if you don't know that code, if you don't know those Genesis stories, then you have to go catch up. You have to go back and read. Okay, what else? There's some literary devices in here. I wish Pam was here because she's good at literary stuff. She's an English teacher. I'm a math teacher. Did you see the riddles? Go back to chapter 3. Do you see them? Mm-hmm, yeah, that section. Read that section.
There's a lion roar in the thicket, and he has no prey. Does he growl in his bed, and he has talking about him? Does the bird fall into a trap on the ground where no snare has been set? The tracks spring up from the earth, and there is nothing to catch. When a trumpet sounds in the city, do not the people tremble? When disaster comes to the city, has not the Lord caused it?
Mm-hmm. Surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. It's just an interesting turn of phrase. Even though Amos is saying the same thing over and over and over again, every now and then the technique changes a little bit. The use of the language changes a little bit. So you've got this set of riddles that's in there. Sometimes, and this is especially difficult whenever you read Paul, because he's good at this. But let's go look and see where Amos is good at this. And what I'm talking about is stuff that sounds negative. Chapter 4. Verses 4 and 5. Somebody read that out loud.
Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes every year. Burn leavened bread and thank God. Brag about your free will life. Boast about this. This is what you love to do.
It's like, okay, sometimes when you read Paul's letters, it's hard to tell when he's doing this, but it's a technique, and Amos is using it here. We don't like to think of God as being sarcastic, but
Hearing.
you can hear him laughing.
Go for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think that's hilarious. Um, if you keep reading in chapter 4, there's another series that follows that, and this reminds you of Revelation. See if you can find the link between this and Revelation. Read 6. Somebody read 6 through 11. Anybody? Mm-hmm. There's another device that he's using, this repetition. You see, mm-hmm. 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 We can't get by without doing that picture. We talked about it a while ago, but that's our story.
Like in high school, you have to describe your relationship with God. Like,
Uh-huh.
he meant it into a solitude.
Okay.
He goes, down here, Lord, dear God, I'm in trouble. Help me, please. I promise I'll be good. And his life gets better. He gets to the peak, he goes, God, I got it, no problem, no sweat, I'm in control. He goes, oh, dear God, I'm in trouble, help me. And,
Uh-huh.
same cycle.
It's
Yeah. Free will stuff kind of gets to us.
mm-hmm. 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 What was the world like before Abraham? Religiously speaking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Abraham was Abraham was is so important to this whole story because that's where God says, I'm going to do this demonstration community. I'm going to show you what I'm aiming for. Okay. And before that, there wasn't monotheism. That's a big word. You know what that means? One God. Uh-huh. Before that, there wasn't monotheism. But this relationship that God has with Abraham and his descendants, it's unique in the world. And it started with our Old Testament. It started in Genesis and continues even now.
One God, we have one God. It's three gods. That's to explain the Trinity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It took them several hundred years after Jesus to come up with that creed, didn't it? Because it's a tricky concept, and they had to figure out how to say it. And you know, some of us may still not have quite figured it out yet.
I don't think it's the
It's a work in progress, just like we all are. Right, right.
It's just nuclear, I mean, it's the golden oil and all work for things, you know, so it's just, it's dying,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's more important? Mm-hmm. Right, right. So have we talked about all the major themes that are in Amos? Economic oppression of the poor. Did you catch all of that in there? Give me some examples of what people do to try to cheat the poor people. Usury, it's called sometimes. That's a Bible word that means the interest is too high, which I have to laugh now. When we were first in the house market, interest rates are in the teens. And when they complain about them being around 5 or 6, it's like, huh. So anyway, but yeah. Uh-huh. Right. But yeah, but the point of this is don't take advantage of the poor people. Don't put your thumb on the scale and make it sound like you're giving them more than they're paying for. What else? The responsibility of leaders to care for the poor. Sin is allowing corruption to pervert our time at the top. Somebody's got to be the leader, but if you're the leader, then you've got a responsibility to take care of the people under you. What does your coin say? Soldiers first. It's important to think about the people over, you know, somebody's got to be leader of something, of anything, but do it honestly. False prophets with their own agendas. That's some of what he's talking about in here. Idolatry. That's what you were talking about a while ago. Duplicity, thinking that, well, I can pay attention to God over here today, and tomorrow I'll go do this on this with this other one. Here's a big Bible word: syncretism. I don't know why it means that, but that's what that means. Syncretism. Trying to, maybe it has something to do with the word synchronize. Trying to synchronize your behavior between this one that looks good and that one that you know you ought to do. I don't know. Anyway, that's a big word. Bethel and Samaria Bethel is the place we talked about that he mostly refers to. The day of the Lord. We haven't really talked about the day of the Lord yet. What's that all about? We can't find it in just one place. It's kind of all over the place. I think so. I think that's talking about what we refer to frequently as the second coming. Jesus is going to come back. At the uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. There is some good news in Amos. If you look right at the very end, you have to get all the way to the end of chapter 9, verse 11 to 15, 11 to 5 verses at the end of Amos, after all these 9 chapters, talk about restoration. And he's been saying all along, you think you're looking forward to the day of the Lord, but maybe you shouldn't be. Maybe you shouldn't be. But there's still going to be some good news here. Let's read the good news here at the end. Somebody read 11 to the end.
In that day I will rise up the root of David that is fallen in the earth, rise up to the days all the days you were called by my name, declares the Lord. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord. Now, the Lord takes the reaper and the treasure of grace and refill the mountains of red sea, all the hills shall be gold. I will restore the fortunes of my people. They shall rebuild the ruins of the hills. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall make gardens and eat their fruit. Plant them on their land. They shall never again be uprooted out of it.
That sounds like Revelation, doesn't it? It sounds like, so there, it's like some of the Psalms are praise songs and some of them are laments and some of them have some of both. They have praise and they have complaining to God and they have worship of God. Some of them have a combination. These prophets are going to hopefully have some of each. Amos only has a little bit of this promise of the restoration, but it's there. And why, one of the questions that I read in one of the things that I read said, why is there this sudden, shockingly sudden turn to blessing and renewal? Why is it shocking? Because he spent most of that time doing the litany of what people are doing wrong. So, do we see Jesus in Amos? Where's Jesus in Amos? Mm-hmm. Jesus might have had something to do with taking care of the poor. Some preachers that we've had in the past talk about the least, the last, and the lost. The Bible seems to be very concerned about those folks who need something that we can help with. I think that's the reason we have such a strong mission program at this church. We're doing a good job of doing that. The problem will be when we become so proud of that we forget why we're doing it. What else? Mm-hmm.
And with that, for years, you know, that was kind of like, you know, it's better than you think.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Other comments?
But getting that shape the house of Israel not all made. That he says only the cat, the remnant of the earth, the careful blessing.
Uh-huh.
The cat.
Mm-hmm. This one talks about pebbles not reaching the ground.
Figure out what that meant by those pebbles.
A sieve. What do we call those things now? Strainers? Things with holes in them. You dump something in, what you don't want falls down, or what you do want falls down, and you dump out what's inside, or the other way around. It works both ways. Just depends on what you're doing. You have to be careful what you put into which one. Right, 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 right. Right, right, right. But that's what it's talking about is the sorting, the sifting, the separating um, the good from the bad. So I think you got it. I think that's what that's going on, what that's talking about. Other comments? What else did you read when you were studying? You guys are really good. You could do this. Sure, you could do this.
I can do it.
I thought about that. What was it? When was it that we did that? When was it we did that, Kathy? Yeah. Um, disciples, the disciples, we let everybody take a turn. And I thought about that with this one. And it's like, it worked out really well to have individuals take a turn because you never know what each one of you have different resources in your possession. And that's why that idea, I did think about it, but they're disciples. Uh-huh.
After all, we're sitting there eating that takes time. You didn't have to do it all.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So anyway, here's something that I read that we might want to end with. Reading Amos forces us to watch for corruption and dishonesty in our own lives. May your reading of Amos spur you to speak out boldly against injustice and corruption wherever you find them, even if you find them within yourself. Do I need to read it again? May your reading of Amos spur you to speak out boldly against injustice and corruption wherever you find them, even if you find them within yourself. We need to be on the watch, especially with ourselves. Two things. Hosea is next week. Come and bring a friend. I have more folders. Would somebody like to close us with a word of prayer?